So today, what I will talk about is basically, DOS joiner, right? Hunting the bad guy. So there's a bit background about myself. I've been with FireEye in the past 5 years, as a cyber threat intel consultant in APJ. So I've been having look at threat intel in the past 5 years here. Basically, what we do is help our customers to look at different threats from around the world and what we see and how we can warn them upfront first, to be prepared in such threat that we observe. Of course, in the past 20 years of my experience, I've been working for many different companies, from all the way from the US to Malaysia and Singapore, and now finally in Singapore. It's a great opportunity here because in the whole APAC, there's a lot of new things happening, a lot of new threats, as we see, as a whole ASEAN and Asia is growing at a very rapid pace. And in my expertise, I've been in the past doing a lot of work for threat insights, for detection labs. So that's my experience in the past. So I dealt with a lot of malware, cyber threat analytics, knowing the scheme of things where all the attacks are. I did work in IT security consulting as well. And of course, last but not least, I also have been in the security operations center. So I've seen quite a fair bit of, in the whole cybersecurity space in terms of all the different industries. All right. Jumping straight into my topic today would be basically, I did put this in there, what exactly is TRITON. So today, in order to share, a little bit about joining the dots, right? How do we get, how do we use our skills to find out what the bad guys are doing, how they do something, and what they do. So this incident happened actually 2-3 years back, right? Back in late 2017, we were the first to actually discover about this TRITON malware. We named them TRITON because this was the first malware that was capable to, that we have seen that is able to disrupt. Of course, in the past, there were, malware in the past that disabled nuclear power plant as well. But we have seen this basically, it will actually cause damage to critical infrastructure. In this case, this was linked to where Russia first had this malware deployed in one of the industrial systems. And what it does is actually able to disable safety systems. And this is important because in the past, viruses are just there. When people drop a malware, they are there to cause damage, right? They're there to cause disruption. But today, this is actually
Unfortunately, we're facing a little bit of some technical difficulties, but we will be putting Mr. Goh back up once he has reconnected with us.
Damage, right, to people. And what happened was this malware was designed to interact with the Schneider SIS systems, right? This is the control system that control all the safety systems in, let's say, a power plant, let's say in an oil and gas facility. And it's very important because this could mean life or death, right? So what exactly is TRITON able to do? So what they target is this brand. I'm sure you guys might have heard of, Schneider Tritonix, or the brand Schneider, right? They are involved in doing a lot of these operation technology systems. However, the specific ones was the safety instrumented system, the SIS controllers. I know I have some pictures here to show how it looks like. Basically, this is, I'll give you an example. What would this do? These are systems that controls, let's say, in a nuclear power plant, for example, and there is a fire. This system will have to be able to shut down safely all the critical machinery inside the factory or inside the facility, which means, this is a safety protection system, right? It is there to help the factory to shut down properly so that, let's say the nuclear doesn't get exposed. It's important because, as I say, imagine your building fire's protection system fail. That's not good at all. If there's a fire, people can die. So this was exactly what TRITON was designed to do. It was really designed to target the safety system and bring it down. We first observed this, and then we will also call in. We know a lot because we'll call in to do the investigation. So this is some background about what TRITON is and what SIS could do. This kind of systems are actually often used in refineries. They are used in chemical plants and nuclear facilities. So as you can see, these are very critical infrastructure. It's all hazardous materials. It could be flammable, and as I said, nuclear could be. It could be more a radioactive issue, right? And if this fail-safe doesn't work, it does really cause a big issue to the factory. So this is interesting because what we have observed was the attribution. We were able to point it back to a group that we call temp.valus. Internally, FireEye, we do a lot of cluster tracking, right? We track bad guys, like this group from this country, and this group, they steal money, and certain group track the group, they might do malicious, and hacktivist group that might, let's say, damage a website's reputation. This group specifically, we have tracked as temp.valus. It's important to point this out because this has been actually tracked all the way back to a Russian research center. So again, we did have a quick picture how this looks like, and then of course, this is the website of the Russian research center where they have research about doing chemistry, mechanics, and probably weapons as well. Now, this is important because the attack path was quite interesting, right? In the past, people would think that, hey, my operation technology, OT systems, especially all this tech machinery, all this SCADA system, they will say, hey, you know what? I'm actually putting it behind a firewall. It's nothing to do with the IT system. It doesn't get infected. So what we have observed is today attackers are pretty cunning, right? They are able to jump across all these different layers. Like for example, in this context where over here is where all the IT systems are. Right? What the attacker are capable to do, first of all, they will compromise your IT systems where they will gain control. They will be able to do reconnaissance, right? Before they do any major attack, a lot of the attackers, what they do is they stay low, they compromise your network, they will start observing. Right, they will do reconnaissance. They will look at where things are going. How do you do things? Where are your systems? And how do I get from here through all your OT network? Like that you have DMZs, you have DCS system where it's a human interface to everything behind here. So what they eventually did was they were able to breach the IT system first. Look at what they do on a daily basis. And then drop in malware in the Schneider systems, and then get through to the back, all the way to the SIS controllers, where in this case, they are actually controlling all the operations of the plant. Again, we have a lot of tracking against this. Initially, it was hard to know who did what, right? Over here is basically how FireEye tracks our bad guys. We do have... as you can see, different names and code names that we gave. Like for example, UNC333. We look at how many known aliases they have out there, right? What kind of method they use. So this is how we actually track the bad guys. In order to track what the bad guys do, we look at what kind of malware they use. We look at their target. We look at who they've targeted and what kind of methodology they use. All these are very important for us to see overlapping instances to see, okay, this is... So there's a lot of investigation going on, right? To know who did what, using what kind of infrastructure. And in this case, it took us a while because we couldn't match, against what we were tracking in the past. So FireEye has been in this business for the last 14 years. So we know bad things in the past 14 years, who did what, and we have a campaign that we track all this. Of course, we did IR as well during the whole investigation. We do incident response. We found something interesting, but really nothing much to attribute, because attribution is actually very difficult. Every time people will ask, hey, this incident happened, do you know who did it, right? It is actually very difficult to actually point out who, and especially when you have nothing much to start off with. So what happened was we started looking at different malware they use. Again, these guys, they are definitely very professional. you're talking about they use custom malware, right? All this are custom built by them to drop in backdoors, like CryptoCat based backdoors, to actually allow more payload to be dropped, right? They move around laterally in the network. And then, of course, they also harvest credential, right? These are the key things that they would do. Basically, they want to get more to infiltrate deeper and deeper. So we were then called on to respond to a second intrusion, right? So this is quite serious. So we have already, so basically in the past, we have known, okay, kind of what malware this is. We have quite some analysis, from the tools used by the bad guys, how they did it. We still couldn't really pinpoint who did the job, right? We said, okay, most likely it's Russian, but however, we do not have anything to point towards to. Now, this is what gets more interesting. So throughout the months after that, when we have looked at different open source frameworks, they do use some of these tools, and you guys can look at it out. So these are all more open source tools like Metasploit, CobraStrike, where pen testers use as well. So we were able to look at some of these projects that we have seen them using dropping CryptCat samples basically to their targets, right? So what they want to do is be able to get into the network, get into the factory, maybe drop the malicious sample. And what was interesting was when they dropped the sample, the payload, we were able to notice, that like in your directory, there's always something that, when we do investigative research, we found a unique handle that was used, right? So as you know, bad guys have their own handles, who they call themselves and what they do. And with that, we actually were able to. So this is where all the forensic work, or as you call it, the CSI work started, and that's what makes this very interesting, right? That's why we call this a dot joiner. How you put all the dots together. So the unique handle. So we were able to find a news magazine that was published in Russia. Basically, this person, the handle, was actually credited with some research that was in the Russian version of the Hacker magazine. And then, it's interesting is as we dig deep, right? As I mentioned, a lot of this attribution goes more than just a technical part of it. Once you know who it is, you need to do some forensic work and say, hey, these guys, we actually saw some articles that had the photo and the name of this guy with the handle, right? So, okay, now that gives us, hey, wait, I think we're getting somewhere here. And with the unique handle, we were able to pin, okay, this is his name, that's his handle. What we did was, the first thing was, hey, let's look at some social media, right? So we were able to look up the handle, and we did find a picture that matches the unique handle, and wow, and guess what? There were photos taken close to in Moscow, and of course the research center that I've shown earlier. So while this is like, okay, this is interesting. When we dig deep, we find more things that is, hey, we're pinpointing who did the job, and most likely where have they done, right? Now, then of course, if you dig deeper, it tells a bit more. Oh, actually, he is a professor in the research institute, right? So, and then definitely this, as I say today, with our digital tracks out there, it's hard to hide unless you're really, really super careful, right? Unless you don't have a social circle, you don't have friends, you don't have anywhere out there that you put things out. It is actually quite not that difficult to look up all this information. So just a little bit background about what CNIHM is. It's basically a Russian-owned research institute, right? And we believe they definitely have capability to build this malware. So they have been responsible for creating all these methods in attacking critical infrastructure, and even like developing weapons, military weapons, all this stuff for the military, and they have all these capabilities. So that's what the research center do. And what was more interesting was we actually uncovered his face in one of the group pictures taken there in the research center. So now we're getting closer, right? We're able to mesh who was in the team, what they did. And right there, after we put out the blog post that, hey, we suspect it's this guys, then of course the website of that research center went down for a little while. I think they took it down. That's why the 404. So, and after we publish it right away, you can see, so before we went public with the post, when you look up the DNS whois information, you can clearly see that, this was registered under them, the IP that came out from, right? So we have been monitoring these IPs, and right after when we did the publication, you can see it was changed when you do a whois, right? So this is definitely very apparent that they are responding to, they know that we are tracking these guys. So these are interesting things that we have been doing, and we do observe these kind of things, right? We look at all the changes in who owns this infrastructure and what they've been up to. Again, we have been tracking the IP for a long time. This is the IP that we look at. Basically registered to them. For a whole year, we've been looking at what they do, who they targeted, and then of course, we have actually a lot of activities that was actually relevant and we can attribute to the same group. That's how we do the attribution, right? Last but not least, these are the few more parameters that we do, right? A lot of bad guys, when they compile all this malware, there is always a timestamp, right? For us, it's important to look at this aspect as well. Again, this is nothing technical about this. It's all about looking at what time they work and most likely where they are, right? As you can see, this is definitely a working hour between, this guy starts pretty late, they come to office 10 to 6. So this is most actively where all the compilations happen, right? So this is how we actually put it into, hey, this is most likely the Moscow time zone, right? That's how we kind of pinpoint and add more, as I say, when we create all this information, or what we call intel as we analyze it, it's all about low or high confidence. So for us to be a lot more high confidence and telling you, hey, this is done by that guy, these are some of the parameters that we look at, right? We look at their working hours, we look at what they do, their social footprint, and we put all these pieces together. And last but not least, we also look at the language as well. As we have mentioned, we throughout all this analysis of all this malware, we do notice that these guys, they look at the name, they do change the language to English as much as possible. Sometimes we have observed this by other actors as well. Like we have observed a lot of these actors, what they do is they take their native language, they kind of put it into like Google Translate and put it into English and annotate it in the malware, which when we put it back into Google Translate, it goes back to the Russian language because usually it doesn't translate well in English. So these are key things that we look for, what language they are, what country they're coming from, and what time zone. So just to wrap this up, so summarizing how it looks like, basically, to put all this together, how we join the dot was basically how we pointed to the intrusion to the unique handle. We look at who the person that was involved. The guy, his picture was in the news magazine that was created. Of course, we looked up in social media. And then, again, we found his picture in a group picture from the research center, and then how we pointed to them. And then, of course, deeper research use that the infrastructure also came from there as well, from where all the malicious activity is hosted and conducted. And, of course, these are the IP that have been tracked, all the capability, looking at, their names, artifacts such as working hours, language, all points to how we actually attribute, and we can come out and say, hey, this was done by this group sponsored by this country. So this is one typical example how we share. How we put the dots together. I hope this is an interesting session for all of you to basically look at how we put this together. And definitely, again, at the end of the day, this is what we create for our customers, right? This is basically a life cycle of the attack life cycle of the group, right? From all the way when they establish foothold, how do they get privilege inside, and how they move laterally inside the network and complete their final mission. So we track our actors in this way. All right. So with that, I would just want to wrap this up with a by Sun Tzu, right? Why is attribution important? Because at the end of the day, so as you say, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you don't know who you're fighting, you can't fight, you can't defend yourself, right? At the end of the day, you want to know who your enemy is and what you're going up against. All right. All right. Thank you for your time. That's my presentation about how we, use our expertise to look at different parameters, different artifacts, and how we point out to a threat actor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll open up for Q&A.
Yes, thank you for the insightful presentation. I think it's definitely very interesting to see behind the scenes and to learn more about this malware as well as the attributes in the threat actors behind the attack. Okay, so now we're going to jump right into Q&A. Seems like it's a short one over here, but we do have some we do have very, very curious people, very excited, perhaps hackers in the audience as well. And they're asking, how can academia or the research community contribute to threat intelligence analysis and attribution? They want in on that action as well.
All right. So definitely today, in this space, there's a lot of ways where I think the academic can help. Most of the time, we have a lot of non-profit organization today. Work with your local chapter of, let's say, for example, CERT, like the local CERT groups, and of course ISAC groups, right? ISAC groups. So a lot of them have all this avenue. Like for example, the banking industry has something called FS ISAC, right? So work with them, and definitely this is where communities we can share different knowledge about bad guys, what they've done and all this, so that we can come together to fight the bad guys.
And in terms of open research, what are some of the challenges that we have?
So in terms of open research, I think today is we're looking for a lot in terms of data points as well. In order to know what the bad guys are doing, it's important to find out all the sources, right? So as I mentioned, as more academic folks and research participate in this open source, let's say for example, we get more coverage in terms of who is in there. It's all about getting more information and expanding our sources. So definitely take part in all these programs.
Once again, thank you so much to Mr. Goh for sharing. Definitely a very, very interesting insight to behind the scenes. And with that, we have now actually come to the end of day one of the Singapore Cybersecurity Education Symposium 2020 virtual event.